Good evening, good evening. How y'all doing, everybody? 1 2 1 2. This your boy Kenny Klutch coming at you live out of Jacksonville, Florida. How y'all doing? Good to see y'all. So glad to see y'all. Welcome to the Parsimonial Boutique Podcast. This is our first launch on the podcast side of things. We're so glad to have Dr. Taryn Chambers Givan here tonight. Great appreciation in advance. Thank you everyone that's tuning in live. This is not pre-recorded. I encourage you to type in the comments any questions that you may want to ask the doctor in any shape or form. We're going to get started. I thank y'all. I apologize for the delay. Big ups to the Jacksonville Public Library. That's where the education lives. Start there and go anywhere. I had booked the conference room, but somebody was in there and they didn't want to get out. So I didn't get out right. The lady said, man, I can schedule you for 7 o'clock, 7. So I had to be patient. So that's what the conference room did. So thank y'all. We're on here. We come on through. I'm going to make sure that if we're broadcasting and someone can see us from another channel, please say so. We should be going live through YouTube. Let me know if you're able to see that live currently. We are live. Thank you so much, Dr. Givan, for being here. Why don't you start off introducing yourself? And jump straight on in.
All right, wonderful. Well, good evening to everyone under the sound of my voice, and also those of you who are watching. I am Dr. Taryn Givan. Actually, the band says its name. You make a joke every now and then. My first name used to be the name that was extremely difficult for people to get. And then I got married and I have a last name that is sometimes questionable. So at least I'm at 100%, right? First and last name, but it's Dr. Taryn Givan. At the end of the day, I'm Taryn. I thank you so much, Mr. Kendall, for having me a part of this podcast. I am a native of Texarkana, Texas, or for those of you who don't know where that is, Northeast Texas. I am currently the founder and CEO of Divergent Educational Consulting, LLC. I'm a career educator. This is actually my 24th year in education, and I still use kind of that fiscal period that our public schools use. So when you think about maybe the contracted year, and so when we get to June 30th of 25, I'll be rounding out my 24th year. I've served in education as a teacher, an assistant principal, a principal. I've worked as an adjunct faculty member. In addition to me having my own consulting business, I also work as the contract operation manager for Better Lesson, which is an educational technology company. And so, I'm a wife, a mother, a daughter, a GiGi, a friend, a child of God. And I just strive each day to be a better version of myself. It is definitely not a competition with anyone else, although I am very much inspired by a lot of people, those that I know, those that don't know who I am, or don't that I know them. But I am definitely out to just try to be a better person, a better human.
Amen. And I thank you for doing that, because that's the big thing these days, just paying it forward. And I thank you for that. Talk to me a little bit about your experience or your choice in the historical African American sorority, Delta Sigma Theta.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing that in. I didn't know that we were going to have a conversation about Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. When I went off to school as an undergrad, I went to the University of Central Arkansas in Conway, Arkansas. And I don't have anyone in my family that is a Greek except for a cousin. And she's a member of Delta Sigma Theta. And so it wasn't just understood that I would possibly be looking at that sorority. But as I did my research, as I observed the young ladies at that time on the campus, it was a natural fit. Of course, shout out to all of the sororities and fraternities of the Divine Nine, as we call it. But Delta Sigma Theta sorority fit for me. And what I do love about it, of course, is the community service aspect. I'm very big on, as you said earlier, paying it forward, giving back, using my God-given talents to be able to serve. And I think that it's important for us to know, whether or not we're in a sorority or not, is that we all have an opportunity to reach others. I have a scholarship that's called Each One Reach One. And that it sounds like a cliche, right? But it's real.
Mhm.
And so within Delta, that is something that is definitely honed in. We work together as a sisterhood to make sure that we are doing what we can, that social action, excuse me, and thinking about just all of the challenges that we're facing, as an African American in the United States at this time, and all of the years prior. Delta Sigma Theta was founded in 1913, and so you think about the fact that we're still kind of fighting the same fight of our ancestors and those who came before me. But I am just thankful to be a part of a organization that is also pushing, that scholarship. And so with me recently obtaining my doctorate, I know the importance of education. I've seen the importance and what it can do to change the legacy of my family, and to really just make sure that I'm an example for those who decide, even if it's not about getting a doctorate, it's just about providing an example. And so when I put on, my jacket, or when I wear my letters and I'm out in the community speaking to children or young adults who have an interest in going that route, pledging a fraternity or a sorority, I think that it's great for them to have those examples of people that are right there in their community. And then there's also so many opinions, right, around pledging a sorority.
Yeah.
As you heard me say earlier, listen, I am a child of God. I don't worship Delta Sigma Theta. I make the letters don't make me.
Wonderful. And that's great because you have that professional separation, you have that collective recognition from society internationally, and then you have that sisterhood. That's a lovely thing to have. Now, I see so many different educational hubs that you've studied from. So I'm going to walk through the ones that I saw, and I just want you to sprinkle some of that experience or how it's helped mesh into where you are now and some of that motivation. The first one I have is Texas A&M Texarkana, and it may not be in order, but just
Mhm.
give me some feedback on some of those experiences there.
Yes. So Texas A&M University-Texarkana is our local university. It is where I completed my master's in curriculum and instruction. And, this didn't happen directly after I came home with my bachelor's degree. There was a gap in time, because when I came home, I went straight into teaching. Graduated in May, an undergraduate of 2001. I was in the classroom August of 2001. And so that experience in the classroom definitely helped me as I was studying, for my master's at Texas A&M, or TAMUT, as we call it for short. Had the opportunity at that time to be face to face. I don't quite remember if we had a lot of hybrid models or the ability to be online as much, but I actually was face to face. So I would leave the classroom, and on those nights that I had classes, I would drive out to the university, sit in the class, and go through that program. And it was a 2-year program for me. And so I finished that, and that actually led to me being able to have some adjunct experience at Texas A&M University, Texarkana. So I say that to say, you never know how, when you're showing up in excellence, who's watching. I was a guest lecturer for one of our professors. She had to be out one night, and while I was a student getting my master's, she actually asked me to just facilitate the class. I wasn't trying to replace her, but she said, I really think that you can do this. So if you'll just facilitate the class tonight so that I don't have to cancel. And after looking at the comments on the surveys from my peers, basically, uh,
Right, right.
it led to them saying, well, you know what, we think that this would be a great opportunity when you finish with your master's to be an adjunct here. And so on and off for about 10 years, I was adjunct faculty at the same university. And so I say that to encourage our listeners, and that, for one, take pride in who you are as an individual. But I try not to go about anything haphazardly, because again, I don't know what door that's going to open for me. And just showing up authentically, showing up genuinely as myself, I am a teacher. Yes, I've been an administrator, I've been an assistant principal, a principal. At the end of the day, if I can't do anything else, I know that I can go into a classroom or I can show up online for a virtual setting. And I get a lot of joy out of that teaching aspect, or the cycle of teaching and the teaching and learning. And so it afforded me an opportunity to just have some extra income as an adjunct. Yes, I was still teaching in P12 and eventually transitioned into being a campus leader, but I would also have the opportunity to be an adjunct and help to support that professional development for those who wanted to be an educator. So that's a little bit of my story with Texas A&M University-Texarkana.
Wow, that's wonderful. And one of a lot of not only the takeaways, but just the fact that you always had to be ready so that when the baton is passed, you can pick up and finish the race. You had to be prepared in that moment. If you would say, "Oh, I'm not prepared. I'm this and that," the opportunity would have went to someone else. And I'm so glad you were open-minded and pre-prepared enough to catch the ball and make the touchdown. So wonderful. How about University of Central Arkansas?
Yeah, so that's my undergrad experience. I will probably always smile very big when I hear University of Central Arkansas. First I want to acknowledge that, it is a PWI. It's not an HBCU. Hopefully we'll get to that experience. My first HBCU experience was with Clark Atlanta University with my doctorate. But as an undergraduate, I actually received a full ride to UCA. And so being raised in a single parent home, that was a no-brainer. Of all of the schools I applied to, yes, there was different financial assistance or scholarships that was thrown my way. But when you talk about a full ride, meaning my mother didn't have to worry about anything, it was a no-brainer. I liken it to talking about the story of like the three bears and going into, the home and trying to pick what was just right. UCA was just right for me. It wasn't too small. It wasn't too big. It was 2.5 hours away from home, just enough for me to make it seem as if I was a little bit grown, right? I was away from home. And so a lot of factors went into it, but I will say ultimately it was that my financial or the financial aspect of going to college, that burden was taken away from my mother. And then getting there and just being raised as an only child and then getting to a university where you're now able to really start tapping into trying to find out who you are and getting to interact with individuals from all over, not just your community, not just from the state of Arkansas, but all over, international students. It was a great opportunity. I was a part of the student orientation staff, so helping other students move in, was a part of the Student Government Association. I was president of the Students for the Propagation of Black Culture. I was the 98 homecoming queen. And so there were a lot of great experiences in the extracurricular outside of the classroom setting as well. My first experience traveling abroad came from the University of Central Arkansas. I actually got an opportunity to study in Europe, a 5-country tour in 1999.
Wow.
And one of the things that I tell people about that is all of it was paid for except for my spending money and my passport. And, that's almost unheard of when you think about having continuing education opportunities.
Yeah.
But at that time, there was a big push to make sure that the students who went, that it was diversified. And so a couple of us were tapped to say, we have this opportunity if you're interested in it. And I had to go through the quote unquote vetting process, right?
Mm-hmm.
You had to
Mm-hmm.
complete an application, you had to write an essay, you had to be interviewed, and I was chosen. And it was one of the greatest experiences that I can think of. I used that experience traveling to Europe when I was a teacher. I was able to visit Amsterdam. I was able to visit the secret annex of Anne Frank. And one of our units of study when I was teaching English language arts and reading was about the Holocaust. And so I was able to share my experience of being able to actually see this place and to talk to my students about that. And so, everything has been necessary. Everything that I've gone through from my undergraduate to my graduate studies, moving into being an educator, everything was necessary and it was useful. Even the not so comfortable times of my life, but UCA is near and dear to my heart. My family and my friends know that usually every year around homecoming, that's already blocked on my schedule. I'm going to go back and reconnect with the alum, and do what I can to just be, there for tailgatings and for the Greek show. UCA is where I pledged Delta Sigma Theta. Shout out to the Lambda Upsilon chapter. So that is, that undergraduate chapter is where I came through. And so there's, even with the studies, moving into the education department when I finally declared a major, because I was teetering between, do I really want to be an educator, although that was the calling on my life, or do I want to try to make some money? And I say that loosely because we know that educators are not paid what their worth is. And so many of the educators in my life would encourage me to look at other sectors, look at other careers, but it was a calling on my life. And I was encouraged to just I call him Papa Rader, the late great Don Rader, who was my high school principal and eventually the superintendent that I worked under when I came back to teach. He encouraged me just to take a moment to go observe in schools. I thought I was going to be a pediatrician. He knew that I was destined to be an educator. And once I declared that major in the School of Education there at UCA, had some amazing, educators, that just really cemented for me that that is where I was meant to be, and that my calling was meant to be an educator. And here I am, almost completing my 24th year. So UCA, definitely is fun to my heart.
Wonderful. I'm glad that fondness is at the foundation where you started and then always stays with you. Because a lot of times as you progress, I'm sure each chapter has a specific, designation there, but as a total, I'm glad you bring that energy out. Let's see. This next one is Stephen F. Austin State University.
Yeah, so Stephen F. Austin State University is where I received my principal certification. I had already completed my master's with TAMUT, and I never thought about leaving the classroom. It was never my goal to become an administrator. Now, other people saw that in me. I was content in the four walls of my classroom, being in there with my students and teaching. He is now the superintendent of Liberty Eylau ISD, which is where I graduated from and started my educational career. His name is Jeff Wright. He was the assistant principal when I was teaching. And when he transitioned to be a principal, he was vetting me to come and be on his campus to eventually be an assistant principal. And I was like, no, I don't have a desire to be an assistant principal. I'm good being a teacher. And he really pushed, and he found the principal preparation program at Stephen F. Austin and shared that with me. It was a fast track. And so I started in the spring of 2010 and finished by August of 2010 with that principal preparation program. But one of the good things was that a lot of the courses that I had in my master's for curriculum instruction, they were able to be used for this program. And so I went through the spring, I did Maymester, I did summer 1, summer 2, to then be approved to take the state test to receive my principal certification. And as soon as I received my results, the district had given him the assistant principal position on his campus that he had asked for. And I became the first AP of that campus. And so I did have to travel. The majority of my academic career there at Stephen F. Austin was online, but I did travel from time to time, to sit in classes, to be a part of a quote unquote residency, not very, very much similar to what we do in the doctoral program, but maybe that will put it in mind for some people. But that was my experience there. And so I'm very grateful. That was the start of my 10-year career as a campus leader, between being an assistant principal and a principal.
Wow, that's a beautiful trick. All right, last but not least, Unless I left anyone off, let me know. Did I cover all of them?
Yes, you've covered all
Oh,
of them.
cool,
And
cool.
now we
All
get
right.
to the HBCU.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so Clark Atlanta University, shout out to CAU.
Yeah, you in the house.
Yes, me obtaining my doctorate has always been a dream of my mother's. And I knew eventually it would happen. I just didn't know when it was going to happen. As people say, and not to be too cliche, but life be lifing. When I was teaching, I was married, went through a divorce, became a single parent, and there was a lot on my plate, making sure that I could show up for my students as I transitioned from being a teacher to an assistant principal and eventually a principal. I was a turnaround principal. Um, and that's like a whole nother conversation for those who understand the concept of having to come in for school improvement and take maybe what people consider an underperforming school, turning that campus around, getting it to meeting the state requirements, and then sustaining that. And so the thought of me working on a doctorate at the same time, it was a little bit overwhelming. Not that I doubted that I could do it, but I
Hmm.
wanted to make sure, as I stated earlier, I wanted to show up in excellence. And that's very important to me. Like my name, where my name is seen, what it's attached to, I want to do it justice,
Right.
not seeking perfection, but I do hold myself to very high standards. And so it got to a point where I kind of had this itch, right? That something needed to change in my career. I did
Hmm.
not dub myself as a forever principal, although I could see myself as a forever teacher. I knew that I did not want to be a campus leader forever. And so it got to a point where, through conversations with district leadership, conversations with my husband, I did get remarried. So with my now husband, and just prayer, that consultation with God, it became evident that it was time for me to transition out of my principal position and get in a position to be able to start working on my doctorate. And so, shout out to one of my best friends, Dr. Stacy Robertson, who also works at Clark Atlanta University. He completed his doctorate there as well. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, is it time? Are you ready to start your doctorate?" And here's the program that we have. It's an accelerated program. This may be something you're interested in. I asked him to share the information with me. I actually applied to be a part of the fall 2020 cohort. And because of COVID, there was a reduction in the number of students being accepted. And I was asked if I would be interested in my application being moved to be considered for the fall of 21. And I was selected after going through that vetting process. And, it's my first HBCU experience. Now, the majority of that was online, but I'm so thankful for the residency opportunity each summer to travel to Atlanta, Georgia, to be on campus, to learn more about CAU or the AUC Center, to go over to Morehouse, to go over to Spelman, and learn about all of this rich heritage there in Atlanta, Georgia. And just like I smile heavily about UCA, if you take those same letters and just transpose them, I'm smiling very big about CAU. My dissertation chair, Dr. Sean Warner, I have to give him a huge shout out, is one of the bright points of my experience there. Cohort 4, or what we call the illustrious Cohort 4, I have to give them a shout out. My peers who we journeyed through that experience together, helping each other. But there is definitely something special about the HBCU experience. No, I did not get that experience as an undergrad, but it is still very, very important to me to be able to say that I received my doctorate in higher education leadership from Clark Atlanta University.
Wonderful. I'm glad you mentioned that mix because you use a term that I like hearing now in today's climate, especially in the education climate with hybrid, on and offline, diversity, and in some instances, not having diversity in our programs anymore, and how that tightly fits in our current world, but how we have to maneuver around that in our world. So I'm glad you brought that up from the beginning standpoint. Even though my beginning wasn't as diverse as I wanted it to be, I needed that foundation as a building block for who I am not yet. And I like that interplay between that.
Right. Well,
I'm so glad. Go ahead.
if I could just add this, you know, we have a lot of conversations within our community about HBCUs, and while it is very important, we have to also understand that not all of our children are going to attend an HBCU. And so not only do we push HBCUs and we understand the importance, we should also, in the same vein, be fighting for those equitable opportunities for our students to get into any college or university, and to make sure that that environment is conducive to them thriving and them learning. As I stated earlier, my initial college experience happened at a PWI at the University of Central Arkansas. And so while we know that HBCUs are important, and I am thankful to be a product of that with my doctorate, we know that every, you know, African American or Black student, however you identify, is not going to be able to grace the grounds of an HBCU as an undergraduate student. So then how do we also fight to make sure that other universities or other colleges are at a place to where they are welcoming and that they are conducive for the perspectives and the lived experiences of our students? And so I just wanted to put that out there.
Amen. I'm glad you brought that out because I have a question from the crowd. Big up to the Parsimonial Boutique, all my Parsimonial family in the house. Appreciate the love. I'm glad we got the podcast off the ground. So glad to be here. I have a question from the Parsimonial family. Big ups to November Chic Boutique. She said, "Where can we find your book? And while you're on that, how did a book come about in the midst of all that tightness? You running this, you're doing this, and then you got a book coming up."
Yes, yes. So let me give a shout out to Sparkle Publishing. Um,
Big ups to Sparkle
this,
Park.
yes, the CEO and founder is one of my best friends, Dr. Kimberly Ellison. And this is actually the fourth book that I have co-authored with Sparkle Publishing. So the book that Patrice, if I'm saying your name correctly, thank you so much for asking that question. The book that I believe that you're referencing is Centering Our Voices: The Brilliance, Persistence, and Significance of Black Women Educators. It is actually an extension of my dissertation research. And that book can be found on Amazon. You can also find a link to order the book directly from me at www.divergenteducationconsulting.com. And so, as I mentioned earlier, my dissertation chair, Dr. Sean Warner, he really encouraged me not to just sit on my dissertation. You know, we know the best dissertation is a completed dissertation, but so much time and energy went into that research. What else can you do? Presenting at a conference, you know, turning it into an article. Well, I had a conversation with Dr. Ellison and her team. And although my dissertation focused on Black women educators in academia, I wanted to expand that. And I just wanted to celebrate and to be able to have a platform for the lived experiences of Black women educators, not only in higher education, but also K-12. So that's where Centering Our Voices: The Brilliance, Persistence, and Significance of Black Women Educators was born. We put out, I guess you could say, the clarion call to invite other Black women educators to be co-authors with me. And from there, it took shape. And if I'm not mistaken, yeah, we're coming up on a year. So it was March of 2024 that we actually did our launch. And many of us have had either individual book signings, or we've been a part of other educational opportunities to be, to, you know, like facilitate a part of a workshop. Several of us actually traveled to the National Alliance of Black School Educators, and we had a breakout session around our book, and to be able to encourage others who are aspiring to be educators, but also to get our story out there as Black women educators and our lived experiences. Who better to tell our story than us? And so thank you so much for asking about that. Oh, yes, your niece is an educator. Please do. Please share it with those educators that are in your circle, in your family, in your life. And for it to be used as a sense of inspiration for them. I think it's important for anyone in any career field to truly understand that you're not in this by yourself. You're not alone. Even if the stories just parallel, there's probably someone out there that has experienced something very similar to what you've experienced. And as Black women, we have a unique story to tell. And so I'm thankful to be the visionary of that. With the International Book Association, we were also selected as the winner. Our anthology was the winner of the Nonfiction Anthology Award, and then we were a runner-up for Women's Studies, Women's Issues. And so we actually have some awards associated with our anthology.
Amen. Amen. And I'm so glad you're bringing it all home, because you're starting off with thoughts. Starting off with getting out of your own way and speaking to each other. And next thing you know, the rest of the road is built, pre-built. But I'm sure you had to learn things along the way, and whatever you learned in challenge format. But how did you tend to just get off into education? I heard you say earlier when you felt like this was your calling, and then just turn that into a business and entrepreneur and pivoting. How did some of those things get started? Did you always knew you wanted to do this, or what were some of those uneventful experiences that help keep that momentum in stride?
Right. I think I briefly touched on this when I was talking about the University of Central Arkansas. But when I went off to school, it was not to declare a major in education. Mm-hmm. However, my loved ones, and particularly Don Rader, which I called him Papa Rader, the late great Don Rader, individuals like that who were able to say, we've watched you grow up. I've seen you interact with children. I've watched you lead out in the community. I've seen you at your church with children. This is natural for you. Mm-hmm. And he also was such a huge educational advocate. His biggest thing was, we need people like you to influence education and to also touch our children. And so it was his phone call to me that said, before you declare a major, I know you're thinking about medicine. You've said pediatrician. He was like, wonk, wonk. No, right. I need you to go and observe in a school. I need you to get into a school. I actually took the opportunity to go and observe. I set that up in Little Rock, Arkansas. Conway is about 30 miles on the other side of Little Rock. I went to a school in Little Rock, and when I walked in, it was magnetic. The children were like, are you our substitute for the day? Who are you? What are you doing? And it was definitely a reminder that this is just something that's natural for me. So I went back and declared my major for elementary education, graduated with my bachelor's degree. Papa Rader, as I called him, said, if you want to come home, I have a job waiting for you if you want to come home and teach. So I came home, started out teaching fourth grade science, because at that time I was actually pregnant with my daughter, went out on maternity leave, came back, and he shared with me, of course, that we really want you to be in, maybe a tested area. One of my passions is reading comprehension, but the first year he didn't want to do that with me having to come in and quickly go out on maternity leave. So my second year teaching, I transitioned into teaching reading, English language arts and reading, and also science still. And it just continued from there. I absolutely loved being in the classroom. I tell people one of my favorite movies is Remember the Titans. And I don't know if you remember when Denzel Washington, or Coach Boone, was walking out on the field, and he said, this is my sanctuary right here. That feeling that he shared right then, or that excitement that he had walking out onto the football field, is what I felt walking into my classroom. Now, not to say that there weren't days that were extremely challenging. There were. But I felt like within those four walls of my classroom that I was free to be me. And my fourth graders were so forgiving, but they really, really responded to that authenticity of who I was. And they could tell that I enjoyed what I was doing. To those educators that might be listening, I do want to say this before I forget. One of the challenges that I ran into being, a new teacher was some of the seasoned teachers, if that's what we want to call it, those who had greater seniority, had been there longer than me. There were some of those educators who could come across very discouraging. The hashtags of my business is different, progressive, out the box. Those describe me. I wasn't trying to have my classroom look like anyone else's classroom. I wanted my students to enjoy coming to my class every day. Behind me is a sign that says no one rises to low expectations. So I did hold them to very high expectations, but I wanted students to understand that there could be enjoyment in learning. I didn't want to just teach to a test. I didn't want them to think that our reading had to always be aligned to, oh, we're getting ready to take this state test in the spring. And so there were times when I would plan with the team that I wasn't going to do everything that they were going to do. I didn't want 1,000 worksheets ran off. I'm not going to present it this way. I'm going to try to find another innovative way to engage my students with the same content. Well, that doesn't always go over well. Unfortunately, in society, we have a notion of wanting people to just fall in formation and look uniform and to be complicit. And I challenged that. And so when I heard someone say, just give it a few years, you won't have all of this fire. I used that as a challenge. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll show you. And I'm one of those, I can show you better than I can tell you. And so for those 9 years that I was in the classroom, it was my goal to make sure that I created a welcoming environment for my students, a place where we enjoyed, where we learned, where we had discussions and conversations, and I allowed them to be a part of that planning process, what we call co-creation. It's not a new term, but for a lot of people, it is definitely a term or a concept that would get people out of their comfort zone. When you talk about relinquishing some of that quote unquote power to your students and allow them to be able to say, here's an evaluation of this lesson. It didn't go as well for me. I didn't learn. Can we do this? What about this? And to be able to take their suggestions and to be able to weave that into my lesson planning, that's a new concept, or it's very uncomfortable for some people. And then taking that from being a teacher and being able to have an influence as an instructional leader, as an assistant principal and a principal, I saw how vital that was, especially as a turnaround principal, to be able to have an influence over that instruction and what's happening in every classroom. So many times we see that if students have this teacher, they're going to thrive, they're going to do well, where the goal is no matter what classroom they go in, that these students should have a fighting chance and that they should be able to thrive, and that the playing field is leveled for them. And that's still a fight, right? We know that that's why it's been pushed for some parents and families to want to make a request. I don't blame them. They're making a request of that classroom that has the data that shows that this is where children thrive. They have an educator who sees them worthy of respect. Not just a one way, will you respect me because I'm the educator in this room, but respecting our students, respecting their perspectives and their experiences. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I always did it right. But because I gave students an opportunity to share with me about their learning, I was able to grow as an educator, because they were like, that may have worked for this student, but that's how we get into differentiated instruction. That I didn't learn this, or this is something that I need differently. And so for me, my career as an educator has continued because I've seen the value in having someone who truly enjoys being an educator, but is also not afraid to be an advocate.
Excellent. I love that, because you show the creativity through your passion, and your passion starts off from your identity and that picking of a choice. Like you said, you didn't pick it; it picked you. So I like for you to stay on that a little bit and talk to me about some of the obstacles that you had to overcome in the challenging beginning stages, some of that initiative, that drive, that resilience. And you talked about it, sprinkle wise in the past, but just some of those nights when you just by yourself wondering if this is too much, and knowing that I have to get through this. He's not gonna bring me to no tunnel I can't get through. But just I don't know what those thoughts were when you're holding all those different multiple tasks down and trying to achieve the excellence that you want to set foot for every day. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, one particular challenge or situation comes to mind. I do touch on it a little bit in my chapter of the anthology. And I stated earlier that sometimes there are going to be people who have a problem with the fact that you want to carry yourself with not only excellence, but integrity. And so when it became a time for me to possibly look at transitioning from an assistant principal to a principal, I had applied for the position, the principal position that was open for the campus where I had my teaching career. And so, where I was a fourth grade teacher, I was going to go back in the same district. I was currently serving as an assistant principal on another campus. And so, through that process, it was very disappointing for me. The first experience that I had ever had where I truly saw, I guess you could say, covert and overt, just racism at hand.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we had to interview in front of a panel of about 10 individuals. That campus, when I had left in the time frame that I had left being a teacher there, that campus had a turnover in its campus leadership. And there was a lot of concern in the community with the parents, community leaders. And so this was the first time that I had ever interviewed for a position where there were at least 10 people in the room. It was a combination of parents, district leaders, teachers from the campus, and of course, your superintendent. And what I was told was that there was going to be a 2-round process for this interview. The initial interview was going to be with those 10 or so individuals. They were going to then narrow it down to a top 2. Then those top 2 would go through another round with just the superintendent. And again, this is just what I was told.
Right.
And if you've ever served on an interview committee, we know that there is kind of this oath that you have to take to keep the confidentiality in that space. So what happens in that interviewing space needs to stay there. Well, one of the teachers from the campus actually went back and told some other teachers on the campus that I was in the running to be a part of the top 2. These are some of the teachers that I had actually worked with on the campus when I was a teacher. They may not have been in my same grade level, but I was on the campus, so I was their colleague. And word got out that there was some pushback on that. It was going to be between me and another candidate who was not from our community, who was from another area outside of this Texarkana area. And what I learned, to make a long story short, what I learned was some of the biggest pushback was because I was an instructional leader. I was going to hold, those educators to high expectations. As I spoke earlier about making sure that every classroom was going to be the type of classroom that no matter what student walked through there, that it was going to be conducive for learning. I was going to challenge some of those, maybe out of date teaching practices, lecture style. We're talking about a campus of 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. These students need to be engaged. And so you still had some educators who were very much lecturers. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to tell you the lesson. I'm going to give you an example. Now you go sit down and you do it. And so what I learned was there was a lot of people that did not want that. I think they wanted a yes woman. They wanted someone who was going to just go with the flow of what was already happening. But I was that type of campus leader who was going to be able to ask questions and not always listen to the loudest voices, right? You're going to have some individuals who they're the ones who seem to have the control. But what about other teachers and what about other faculty and staff members who have a voice or may even have great ideas? So there was a petition that was started. I feel like the Jackie Robinson of my time in
Yeah.
2013. There was a petition that was started and was sent over to central office. My name was not listed, but I teach reading comprehension. There's inference, there's reading between the line. You didn't have to list my name for me to know that when you state we want someone who's not from this area to give us a fresh start, basically what you were saying was we want him and we don't want her.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, the superintendent at that time did not want to ruffle any feathers. What he told me was he didn't feel like it would be fair for me to have my first administrative experience with so much turmoil in the climate. So they were going to go with, the other candidate. And at that moment, in the moment, I didn't choose to fight it. There
Mm-hmm.
was a peace that came over me, and God was like, no, this wasn't my time to fight that. What I shared with him was what I'm hearing is no matter who has to go there and be the principal, you're still going to have to support them. You're just not going to give me your support. And I gave him my right hand of fellowship, shook his hand, thanked him for the experience, and I moved on my way. All of that was necessary to set me up for what was coming next. So not only did I transition to another district as an assistant principal, then the year after that, I was given the opportunity to be a principal. So much of my opportunity as a business owner, as an independent consultant, as an instructional coach has come from my experience as a turnaround principal and everything that I did in another district. And so, in the moment, while it hurt, while I didn't understand it, while the community was very upset about what had happened, God had a bigger plan for me. And so it was very much a lesson for me to share with individuals such as you all who are watching right now, that there are going to be times where God says not yet. And even though I had applied to be a principal, it was a no for that campus, but it was a yes somewhere else. And so I'm so very thankful for that challenge. I mean, who would think that in 2013, people would be creating a petition to say basically like they did with Jackie Robinson, we don't want to work with you. We don't want you as our principal. And here's the thing. I would understand it if maybe my evaluations as an assistant principal showed that I was unethical, immoral, that I did not, show that I was effective. But I was lauded in that same district as the teacher of the year for the same campus that I was applying to be the principal for. I was its teacher of the year. I was the employee of the month for the district. I was an adjunct professor. I had all of these different accolades and data to show that I was effective. However, we all know what the true reason was.
Yeah.
And so, even though people could not come right out and say it, I knew what the reason was.
Yeah.
God said, listen, I have something bigger for you. Your opportunity will come. It's just not now. And that opportunity eventually came for me. And I am stronger and wiser because of the experience. And I'm able to help to coach and to guide others who may be experiencing that. And it's sad to say that it happens in education, but it happens everywhere.
Everywhere.
Our
Yeah.
career fields are microcosms of the world that we live in. So to think that we don't have people who lack integrity in education, to think that we don't have overt and covert racism happening in education, we would be naive to think that.
Wonderful. That's a great opportunity to talk about things as a creator, as an innovator. You used a great example with the petition, and that has to have like minds. But what do you in that last comment you shared a lot of things that you enjoyed about the experience, especially the work throughs with it. What are some challenges that you find in those, being able to tell a story, or just getting people to be comfortable in their own storytelling, or just things that you sit and say, I wonder if this works, or let me try it. Where did that creative freedom come from, and what type of mentorship or inspiration you could give other people that feel like they get stuck sometimes?
Right. Well, I want to connect it to the name of my business. Divergent, there's a movie connection there. I've not watched the full Divergent series, but what I do know about it is that there's a place where each adult had to choose like a faction and commit to it for a life. And Trius Pryor, I'm not sure if I'm saying the name of that character correctly, but this individual realized that I didn't really just fit the mold of any of these. I'm a divergent. And that was something that I had to come to realize for myself. I am a creative. I may move a little bit different. I don't do well with um, being mediocre or people having an expectation that it's okay to be mediocre or have these low expectations. I don't do well with a whole lot of restrictions. I think that it's important, even as we're guiding our children, for them to be able to tap into those creative aspects, and not to always give every single thing that we want from them, but here are some guidelines, and then let me see what you can do with this. So as an adult, I first had to understand who I was in order to be able to help other people tap into that. And I quickly embraced the fact that, I'm a divergent. I'm different. I think out the box. Just because other people may be traveling, this road, I'm going to really do some evaluation. I'm going to look at it. I'm going to say, well, no, I actually want to do this. And so I think some of the challenges that come with living a life that way is that people might be, and I can't speak for everyone, but in the
Mhm.
experiences that I've had in talking to people, sometimes people are not comfortable with disrupting the status quo. We want to be accepted, we want to be liked, we want to fit in. But when we think about change, when we think about the true challenges that we're facing in our world today, we've got to be disruptors.
Right.
And so, what I challenge people to do is to simply ask questions that are open ended. Here's what's set before you. What do you think about this? Here are the standards. Here's a lesson plan that someone has created, and they're expecting everyone on the campus to follow. How do you feel about this? Where do you see places that you can add in your authenticity? What about the needs of your students? How can you be personable with this and share your story? I think we need to really create spaces for people to understand that it is these different perspectives that make the world go around. We're trying to put people into boxes. We're trying to make it sound like all Black women educators or all Black students have had the same experiences, and that's not true. Again,
Right.
some of those may overlap, some of those may be parallel, but there is joy in being able to give people an opportunity to share their story, very much like what you're doing this evening. My
Yeah.
story may not look like another Black woman educator, but at the end of the day, it is still my story. And so for me, it's very important when I'm coaching and when I'm sharing space with other educators who need guidance, is for to give them an opportunity to just be able to talk and to challenge their way of thinking. what what led you to this? What can you do if you're not comfortable with doing B and C? What are you comfortable with doing? But I think for a lot of people it is really the notion of challenging the status quo and being seen as a disruptor. A lot of people don't want that light shown on them. um, I'm actually finishing up, and it's sitting right here on my desk, the Professional Troublemaker, and I may say her name wrong, by Louis Jones. But a lot of people, and I'm going to show it if that's okay.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people who may have an issue with being seen as a quote unquote professional troublemaker, but it's about not only being a trailblazer, but it's about making the world a better place for those who are coming after you and even those who are currently here. So, as an educational consultant, for me, it's very important that I am sharing my story,
Hmm.
providing the opportunity for people to know that it hasn't always been, roses and sunshine and rainbows, but yet I serve a greater purpose. And it's
Hmm.
about making sure that our educational system, whether it's private, whether it is public, is conducive for learning of all students, but in particularly, yes, for our Black students, our brown students, or African American, however they identify. And so we've got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. We've got
Yeah.
to get comfortable with, being disruptors. And I know that there are ways to do that, to where we don't come across as being, just truly unprofessional or rude. But when there is space for you to be able to challenge the status quo, and
Mhm.
you know that it is going to make a difference for the students on that campus, the students, the children in that community, the educators on that campus, we've got to be bold enough to be able to take that step.
Wonderful. I love that. It reminds me of John Lewis, and when he says, get in good trouble, get in necessary trouble. We shouldn't be afraid of some noise to be able to get in good trouble. And I'm so glad that you're mentioning that, because even at one level, you still have to study the next level in advance. So here it is, and say, "Oh, you're a PhD. You don't need to stop. You could stop learning now. That's the highest. You good." But no, you're treating every door as an additional door of, like you said, that standard of excellence. And I like how you point the finger within.
Mhm.
You have to look from, how do I feel about what's on the inside? If somebody outside of me asks me this and I don't feel the same way, I had to ask myself the right questions.
Right.
And I find myself doing that a lot within my own personal ability. And then I couple it with, oh, I'm an introvert. Oh, I don't like to talk to people. Oh, I work with people all day long. And next thing you know, I don't have a thought that fuels anything further than just how I feel about it. So that's how this came about. I was like, man, I know I shouldn't be feeling like this. And so I could hear from other people's obstacles, learn from that, and make it adaptational to my personal journey. And I appreciate that so much. And I hope our listeners can take that idea and parlay it their way too. Um, Take us through like a typical day in handling all of that, balancing personal life stuff, job, business,
Yes.
homestead, market, and all that. What is a typical day like for you?
Right. Yeah. So I know that I mentioned earlier that I also work full time for an ed tech company called Better Lesson. And so, even though I work remotely, which I am very much grateful for, I didn't see myself transitioning into the ed tech space to being in that work from home or remote work. I didn't see myself being there because for 19 years before I started this remote work, I was boots on the ground. I was, going to a brick and mortar, showing up on a campus. And so, one thing that I'll say as far as my schedule and my life now, what remote work has afforded me is flexibility. And I've got to put that word out there. When I initially transitioned into starting with Better Lesson, I was a contractor. And so that means I wasn't a full time employee. I didn't have insurance. I didn't have a set salary. And that was very different from being in public education for 19 of those years. I always knew when I was getting paid, what that was going to look like. So it was very difficult when you start thinking about transitioning into different spaces. And it was necessary for me to get to where I am now. But it also or it also shows, excuse me, the challenges of trying to go into entrepreneurship and working remotely. There's so many pluses, that I can name, but one of those challenges is the ebbs and flows. There wasn't initially a consistent income coming in, and so in the work for educators, your high peak professional development times, the money looked great because schools are wanting people to provide virtual workshops or be a part of in-person workshops and things of that nature. But then as the school year goes on, there's less and less of professional development, and so if that's all that you have, you're going to see an ebb and flow, with those finances. And even being married, though, that impacts my our livelihood. It impacts our home. And so when I initially transitioned into that remote work, I absolutely loved the slower pace, the flexibility. When I was on a campus, and especially as a principal, the minute my foot hit the ground, it was on and popping then. It was non-stop. Eating, lunch, what is that? I may have an opportunity to have a smoothie or something like that. And then I transitioned home and I actually had an opportunity to go into the kitchen and eat breakfast and sit down and kind of set your schedule. And there's a great quote unquote work life balance. If I needed to leave and be a part of a doctor's appointment with my mom or my husband, or now with my grandchild, I'm able to block that time and to set a schedule that way, working for myself or even now working for another company. And I can only speak about, Better Lesson. I don't know how ed tech spaces are for other companies, but we are encouraged to take that time for ourselves. We're encouraged to volunteer in our local schools. And so that in itself was just a welcome to change for me. So from day to day, to get to your question, I start off my morning. I might need to do something for Divergent, such as checking emails. Then I transition over into my work as the contractor operation manager for Better Lesson. If I need to block time in my schedule, thinking back when I was working on my doctorate, there were department meetings or cohort meetings that I needed to be a part of. I could block my schedule and join that call virtually and then go back to the work that I was doing. So on a typical day, I'm in here in my office working well until about 4 or 5, maybe for Better Lesson. And then I transition into the things that I need to do for Divergent. And I need to name that I am Divergent and Divergent is me. I have not scaled my business. I don't have other people on the payroll. So when I go and provide professional development or I do public speaking or I'm doing some editing for a partnership that I have, if I'm tutoring, it's all me. And so to your point, I've had to learn to be able to say no. I've had to learn to set boundaries because in addition to that, I'm also a wife, a mother, a GiGi, a daughter, a best friend, someone who is active in the community. And so usually a lot of the work for Divergent happens late afternoon, evening. On Tuesdays and Thursdays is my tutoring schedule for now. If there's any work that I need to do as an adjunct, any work that I need to do in editing, etc., all of that happens in the evening. But my family also, they deserve to have me to be present. And there was a time when I was in public schools and I didn't have that flexibility, especially thinking about my daughter. My daughter was born the first year that I was a teacher. She has literally grown up with me as an educator. She's 23. I'm rounding out my 24th year. And so she had the sleeping bag and she would come and have to lay down on the floor or get her snack while mama's still in the classroom or in her office working, coming home, bringing stuff home with me. So now my daily schedule looks like flexibility and I get to decide how much additional streams of income I want to take on. And I'll say this, the flexibility that I get with remote work, I, it, there's not a there's not a monetary number that you can put on that. There's not a price that you can put on that. Being able to accompany my mom at her doctor's appointments, being able to take off and actually do something with my family and not worry about having to check in, you just can't put a price tag on that. And I actually had to take a pay cut initially from what I was making as a campus principal to get into the ed tech space and eventually work my way back up. Started as a contractor. Now I do work full time. So the insurance, of course, that coverage is back. Having a steady income is back. But all of that was necessary. The work I did in P12 was all necessary for me to be able to support others as an instructional coach, excuse me, or to manage our instructional coaches for Better Lesson. And so I want to encourage you all to understand that even though you have aspirations and even though you may have goals for the future, your current, your now is building that foundation for your next. And so my grandmother used to tell me, don't stop doing your current job in anticipation for the next one. You still have to show up in that excellence, do what you need to do now so that that can set a foundation and open, pathways and doors for your next.
Excellent. That's so well said because that gives us an opportunity to think forward, not just from a centering perspective, like one of our guests asked, but just from a thinking standpoint. And big ups to Parsimony Boutique, our proud leader, Miss Lynn. The same thing, having those boundaries where you could set aside that time as an entrepreneur, as a leader, as a thought processor, and have all those things come out with an excellence at the end of it. You have to have some boundaries. And
Yes.
sometimes we tend to try to take on too much at a risk to our own demise sometimes.
Mhm.
And when we don't plan for that, those kind of things tend to spiral in different directions. But
Yeah.
on
I
this,
absolutely agree. Lynn, thank you for saying that. Just the power in saying no. And also feeling like you don't have to give an explanation. If I'm not available, if my schedule is booked, and I am a true planner. So I'm a person who schedules everything. I put it on my Google Calendar, look, months out in advance. I look at the week, on Sunday night, I'm looking at my week. I'm looking at all the things that are expected of me. And when I look at what's on my schedule, what's on my plate, it took me a while to transition from not feeling like I had to be booked and busy. Like it
right.
is okay to take care of yourself. It is okay to set aside time, even if you choose to just do nothing. If I want to just sit on the couch and binge watch, if I just want to read a book, or if I want to go to sleep, there is nothing wrong with doing that. And it took me a while to be able to get to that point, to know that you've got to set healthy boundaries for yourself. When I was a campus principal, I ended up with vertigo. To this day, we have no clue where the vertigo came from. My doctor could not pinpoint it. I didn't have an imbalance, like, in your ear, your equilibrium, any of that.
Right, right.
One of the things that my husband told me was like, it's stress. I see you waking up early before you even get to the campus. You're on your phone. You're trying to help find subs. Or there's you may have had a teacher or someone on the staff to call in because of whatever, situation. So you're trying to get dressed and you're handling this. You go to the campus early, you leave late. Then you come home and your phone is still ringing. You're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. He said it's stress. And that was a part of me really turning the lens internally and looking at me and saying, is this something that I want to do for the rest of my educational career? Do I want to be in a place to where it is always high stakes, high stress, not being able to enjoy the fruit of my labor? And so that transition came from those conversations. So, Lynn, you are absolutely right. Patrice, you are absolutely right. I have to take care of myself. To you all who are listening and watching, you have got to find time to take care of yourself, because we all know if something was to happen to me, my job would be replaced the next day as a principal or anything that I do now. Now, of course, with Divergent, that's different because that's my business. But when you're working for someone else's business or corporation and dream, you can easily be replaced. And so I used to be the person who received the awards where I had perfect attendance. I didn't miss a day of work. And then I got to a point where no, I'm going to take my PTO, but I wasn't there initially because I thought there was a badge of honor to say that I never missed a day of work. And it was also because I saw my mother do that. My mother is 73 and she's still working to this day. I'm trying to convince her to retire and maybe, volunteer somewhere. We can find something else to do with your time. But
Right.
my mother goes to work sunny, snowy, sleet, rain. She's up and at 'em. She's going to work. She doesn't like to miss work. And so I saw that before me. And I'm not knocking what I saw before me, but I've also come into my own understanding that you need to take your PTO and you need to take
Mhm.
time for yourself. And I didn't always understand it, but trust me, let the record show I understand it now.
Wow. And talking to the choir, because I look at myself sometimes and how many pivots and hats I play, and people rely on you. And the same thing, just self care. How does that look? Um, how do we recognize it within our own individual self and knowing that it exists? But you have to promote it within yourself. You can just be so passive and not worry about it. Next thing you know, you're in the hospital. So I know what you're saying, and I'm taking that personally. I thank you for that. Let's see. What about your creative process? Just things you come up with, ideas, you know. And like you say, as a business owner, you're putting out products, you're getting people to know who you are. You diverse business and in an educational space. What are some of those themes that you use to help get those creative juices flowing?
Right. That's a great question. I'll go back to first and foremost saying, I am a planner. I guess most people would say it's like a type A personality. I'm someone that I don't really fly by the seat of my pants. Like, I've got to have a plan. I want to give a shout out to my great aunt, Bobby McFadden. She really, really helped us growing up. And even now as adults, she tells us to plan your work and work your plan. And so I grew up that way of having a plan. And so I'm a planner. I sit down, I write out the goals, of course, have conversations with my husband as well, because my business impacts our livelihood. It impacts how much I'm on the road or how much I'm busy in the evening doing other, scopes of work or things that I'm contracted for. And so it impacts my family about how much time that they have with me or possibly don't have with me. And so for me, that creative process has to be very strategic and intentional. I don't have the luxury to fly by the seat of my pants. I don't have the luxury to say, anything goes. For one, because I work full time for another company and I'm not retired. Now, let me put it out there. I'm on year 24. I am definitely planning for retirement where I have that total freedom to be able to decide what I can do from day to day, but I'm not there yet. I think that building off of one of my strengths of, being able to communicate my needs and finding people who help to support my business. When we talk about branding, Letitia Rhodes. I want to give a shout out to Boss Lady. She's my web developer. She creates a lot of my flyers and things of that nature when I need to put things out there, especially when I'm doing the pop up library in the community where I'm giving away free multicultural books. I have people on my team that I can depend on, and they understand how I operate, they understand how I move. And so she knows that I'm going to schedule something, that I'm probably going to have already an agenda for our meeting of the things that I have questions about. I'm going to be taking copious notes. I'm going to do a follow up to make sure that we're on the same page. And I just believe in aligning with communication. I don't believe in assumptions. And as a business owner and as a person of one who is an entrepreneur, it's very important that we make sure that all lines are clear, all hearts are clear when it comes to that creative process or planning for the many things that I do with my business. I also want to say that although I'm one individual, I know that I can't do this by myself. So I collaborate with other independent consultants. I'm a continuous learner. I sit under, that guidance of other people who've done this much longer than I have. And although I can't go into it with the mindset of I'm going to do everything that he or she does, I'm looking at what I can apply to my business model, what would work for me, and how I can use this to show up authentically. And I think that that's what has helped me. I can't be everywhere. We all have reach. My prayer is for me to be where God needs me to be, to make the impact and the influence of where I need to be. I may not be a global name. If that's God's intention for Divergent Educational Consultant, when He tells me to go, I will go. But I don't want us to feel as if we're thinking too small when we say we want to be impactful in our communities. There is much work to be done. And that comes with collaboration and networking with individuals to know where is my place? Where can I actually, offer my services, whether it's volunteering my time and whether it's a paid opportunity. And Dr. Kimberly Ellison, my best friend who I mentioned earlier, who's the founder and CEO of Sparkle Publishing, she has really had to challenge me, or she's really challenged me, because I was one of those individuals where, I will volunteer all my time and don't get paid for anything. And so that's another part, of this creative process, looking at how can I, obtain other streams of income, things that may be working for me. So when we talk about the anthology, it's sitting on Amazon. I don't know who's out there ordering the book, but that's another stream of income. When they go to my website to order the book, that's another stream of income because I'm selling books. And these things can be happening while I'm asleep. And then I also pride myself in staying up on technology. I consider myself a techie. In my friend group, they know I love technology. I love to be on the computer, so remote work really works well for me. I have to tell myself, turn the computer off. I want to stay up on the different technological advances. When we are talking about, AI or Chat GPT and all of these different things, how is it impacting education? How can it also help me as just the CEO and founder, as a one woman show here for Divergent? How can some of these digital platforms and things that are out there assist me to be able to do my job effectively and efficiently? And so I think that that's important for us to just understand how we operate. How do you move? Are you type A, type B? What do you need? And then surround yourself with people who honor that and will challenge you and help you to be your best self.
Wow. And that's a vulnerability that's big now. You being pushed into someone other than who you used to be, so that you can be open to who you need to be, and, and that's destiny. And sometimes that's very fearful because you don't know what to expect on the other side of that choice. Sometimes, like you
Amen.
said, it ain't your job, but you still gotta follow the call. It's like, man, it's like, I don't want to be doing all of that. But I like how you promote it because it's a self choice that you have to stay encouraged with. And as your industry changes, as you're being a leader in today's society, uh, some of those things are challenges that take shape in real time. You mentioned Chat GPT and apps and things that it's so convenient. I don't even have to be smart no more. I could just hit a button. I don't have to be going to no grad school and doing all that. So it's a lot of times the answers are more comfortable than my passion for trying is. And so nowadays it's like, man, I don't have to do all that. The convenience of today's convenient landscape. How does a thought leader by yourself, as an independent business owner, stay on
Mhm.
top, have those innovations, keep those edges sharp, allow people to mentor you, you be mentored? How do you tend to keep those skills and those skills upgraded?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. Continuing education helped a lot with that. So me deciding to go back and get my doctorate, being amongst like minds and also different perspectives, being with individuals who were from different career fields or different sectors of education, that has really helped me as a business owner, even working for another company. And I know that may be surprising for some, but my role in another company, which is an educational technology company, it helps me personally and professionally to stay on top of those things because of the work that we do. Our company is remote. We have contractors from all over the United States, international as well, all over, this world. And so having the reach that way, interacting with individuals from all over keeps me sharp as well. Now, everything that I do in Better Lesson, or everything that I have access to in Better Lesson, doesn't always, of course, apply, or I don't have access to that for Divergent, but it helps me to see what's out there, where the needs are. And then again, as I said earlier, where does my business fit here? How can I see a need and fill a need, whether it's locally, whether it's in surrounding communities, or whether it's on a national level? Being a part of conferences, attending different conferences like the National Association of Black School Educators, having an opportunity to hear from others who are out there doing the work, doing this impactful work. That helps me to stay on top of industry changes, which we know are constantly evolving. I'm also a part of our local affiliate, the Northeast Texas Association of Black School Educators. And so being a part of these organizations, Black Women Education Leaders, Be Well for short, it's a national organization. Being a part of these different organizations and being able to, I'm not always on the forefront, right? Sometimes I'm behind the scenes. I'm a member. I'm sitting here. I'm listening. I'm taking in the information. I'm offering what I can. But I have dubbed myself as a lifelong learner, making sure that I stay updated with my knowledge and my skills, those things that I naturally do, and then also stretching myself some. I know for my business, it helps me to operate in my talents because I am one person, but I also want to challenge myself. I've had people ask me, surely you're done. I mean, you have a doctorate. What's next? Well, I actually want to get some Google certifications. I don't think Google's going anywhere anytime soon. So when the time is right, I'll probably go and take some classes and get some Google certifications and stay up on all of that. I use, the Google platform a lot, of course, having Gmail and the Google Drives and things of that nature. And I think that it's very important just to stay up on practice, and to have that versatility, but then also to realize that I'm not going to know it all, and I shouldn't be expected to. And what I love about being an entrepreneur is when people reach out to me and they say, Taryn, we have a need for X. If that's not what my business can offer, I've networked and I've created a community with other educators where I can say, I'm not your person, but I know who is. Let me connect you with another person. And we have to be okay with that. Sometimes we have people, and I hate to say this, but I'm also being real. Sometimes we have people doing mediocre work because it's not your lane. You haven't put in the time and the skill set, and you're not developing yourself for that work. But because it's another stream of income, or because you want to put yourself out there, you go ahead and put your name attached to this work, and it ends up being subpar or mediocre because that's not aligned with your calling or your talent or your business model. And so I'm not changing my business model to meet or to compete with other people. My business model needs to be very authentic and true to who I am and the work that God has given me to do. And again, we all have reach. And so if this is not for me, let me connect you with who is. And maybe the next time you have a different need, I may be the person that you need. If not, I'm still going to be here to support you and get you to the right individuals.
Wow. And that's not just referral, but like you said, that standard of excellence in all that you do too. Keeping that as a positive thing. A lot of times you're thinking about goals or things that you're trying to do, and it's this is not even a job. I'm talking to my sister. This is colleague. And so when you think about things that you're trying to do short term, long term, and having all these different thoughts at the same time, um, you mentioned the one that you're reading now, that professional development, keeping yourself always in the on with um, educational mode personally. But what are some things that you're trying to do short term or long term, and just any other business goals that we hadn't talked about?
So, really, in general, for me, short term, I'm really just trying to continue to center my business around my skill sets, around my talents, and partnering with other educational consultants or businesses
Mhm.
as time, as time allows. That's really short term for me. As I mentioned earlier, and I'm being very, transparent about this. I'm also planning for retirement. So that long term business goal, it is to retire. Again, shout out to my mother, but I'm not trying to still be working full time at the age of 73. I want to be able to enjoy the fruits of my labor. But short term for me is just continuing for one. I have a cap on tutoring at this moment, but I want to stay active with our children. And tutoring with reading comprehension allows me to do that. It allows me to be offer a one-on-one space with students for them to be able to have a safe space to think through and to really dig into that process of reading and what you're thinking, and to talk about all of the different skill sets that go into comprehension. But I have to stay connected to children somehow.
Mhm.
And so I know in my business model that offering those tutoring services, even though it's a very low number because of the time frame and my availability, I know that I'm going to continue to center my business around that. Being available, of course, to provide professional development, whether it's one-to-one coaching or whether it's one-to-many coaching, being able to do some public speaking. I'll tell you, for me, my heart is with novice educators. Nothing against those individuals who may have like 24 years like I do, but
Yeah.
with our novice educators, we've got to make sure that they have the support that they need in order to see themselves being, to sustain in the career of being an educator. And so having someone that may not necessarily be connected to their district, that can be a
Mhm.
thought partner, that can be a safe place for them to land. That's very
Mhm.
important to me, and not just for teachers, for assistant principals and principals, because those are the roles that I had in public education. And so I just want to continue to stay in that area, setting healthy boundaries,
Mhm.
because I have, matter of fact, tomorrow, my grand girl is going to be turning one. And so I want to be able to spend time with her and to be the type of grandmother that my grandmother was for me. That's very
Right.
important. I'm not doing all of this for naught. Like I want to leave a legacy, and my legacy, in my grandchildren, we have I have bonus grandboys, Noah and Jonah. So Gigi doesn't want to be too booked and busy to where she can't pour back into them and also help their formative years, especially these early years. I know as an educator, it's important for them to have quality time, to have someone who is having conversations with them, that's working on all of those foundational skills that they need for, preschool and heading into kindergarten. And I have that. And so I need to be able to provide that time, that quality time as a Gigi, to be able to give back to the legacy of my family as well.
Excellent. You sprinkled a lot of ideas about our next question with like being inspired, thinking forward, having time as an inspiration, not want to be bogged down, being creative, in your creative freedom. What tips do you offer people in general and especially the youth? Because I noticed that you mentioned having the youth as a particular interest in kids. How do you encourage people to take that self-care step or that journaling step or that inward step or even be invited to be mentored by somebody or even just to go volunteer? What tips do you have for people with that?
Right. I think first and foremost, we have to acknowledge the importance of self-care and what it means. Beyond it being a buzzword, we hear it a lot, self-care, but what does it truly mean? What does it look like? What are the benefits in my life for taking time out for self? And when I say self care, I don't mean taking off to then fill your schedule with other things. When
Right.
we say self care, we're talking about you being able to tap into the things that you love, your hobbies, the things that just really like you get excited to speak about. And we know that self care can look different to each person, to everybody. But when we talk about self care, it's providing that time to love on yourself and to do the things that you need. We have people who take staycations. I'm going to actually leave the house. I'm going to go and possibly, if I can, get a hotel room or actually just spend the day out and about doing things for me, or having a conversation with my loved ones, my family, that today, wife, mama, Gigi, I'm actually going to steal away into a guest room and I want to rest. I want to read. This is what I want to do. And I think we have to allow people to understand that we're setting these boundaries and that we're prioritizing self-care, and to get them to understand that I can't do all of the things that I do for you if I'm not taking care of me. And I know that there's a quote, that says we can't pour from an empty cup. What I've learned is that we shouldn't be pouring from what's in the cup. We should be giving to others what's in the overflow. And I can't remember who I heard that from. It's not an original thought, so I don't want to walk away as if that's my original idea. But I've come to realize that the what's in the cup is for me, the overflow is for you. And so we have to get at a point to where we can truly define what we mean by self-care. And then we have to teach others how to treat us, right? I have to make sure that my husband and my daughter and my grandchildren, that they understand what's important to me in order for me to be able to show up for you. And so again, it's just that self-acknowledgement that my schedule was full and I was burning the candle from both ends. And so over the last couple of years, I've had to evaluate and I've had to reflect and check myself. Girl, you don't have to be booked and busy. You can set healthy boundaries. As we said earlier, right, Patrice, I can say no. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm not going to feel guilty about it. I
Mhm.
also feel like being open to mentorships, it's about relationships. And I tell people that energy is transferable. Mr. Kendall, there's something about your energy. This is the first time that we've ever been in a live space together, right?
Yeah.
But even through social media, even through your platform, your postings, me being on your lives, because I join your lives, but I'm there in the chat. I'm not, visible. There was something
Mhm.
about your energy that transferred, and that I could tell that, yes, you're somebody that I want to support. Sure, I'll come on your platform and be a part of your podcast. We have to understand that in order for mentorship to happen, we have to we have to give across an energy that's worth receiving.
Mhm.
And with our young children, they are very good. I mean, they have an indicator of good energy, and those people who are out for their best interest. They know people who are about the BS. They're all talk, but when they look at the walk, it doesn't align, it doesn't match. They're
Yeah.
looking at your life and you're giving me advice on this, but you're not doing it. And again, not trying to come across as perfect, but in mentoring, it's about sharing our experiences, but it's also about walking the walk. And I can share with you this because this is something that I'm currently doing, or this is something that I did and it did not yield good results for me, or it did. And so I think it's about what I'm really trying to say is just being honest with yourself and being real, knowing where you are in your life, what you're capable of doing, what you're not maybe having the availability for or the bandwidth for now, and setting those boundaries and making sure that everybody around you understands that in this season of my life, this is what I need. When I first started teaching early in my career, that season of my life is completely different than what it's like now. I'm
Mhm.
looking for a softer life. When I was first getting started, I didn't have that understanding because I was early in my career. Now, as year 24, I'm looking for a softer life. I'm grateful for the virtual space. I'm grateful for being able to work remotely or to work from home. I'm grateful for the flexibility, excuse me. So,
Mhm.
knowing what you need in this season of your life and being honest with yourself about that, I think it helps to just take care of everything else.
Wow. If someone wanted to get into the education space, or if they're a young person now thinking about going through the levels of academia and just being inspired, what type of starter steps, or how would you encourage them to think for the future or start to plan in that direction?
Okay, so let me speak as a true educational advocate. And I'm gonna have some broken English here if it's okay. Don't come over
Oh,
here messing with our children if you're not trying to, if you don't really have a heart for children, don't come over here. Education, as I was told the earlier part of my career, we need people who truly want to see our children win. You need to understand that it is going to be challenging because we're also not only teaching the students, but we're having to interact with the parents and their families and the community and all of, the worldly things that we're up against. But first and foremost, you have to have a passion for education. So I'll just say, don't come over here playing, playing with the children, playing with this because you like the fact that we have summers off, or you like the fact that you get 2 weeks for Christmas and you get a winter break and you get a spring break. And I know that that sounds, very minute, but there are people who say, well, I chose this because of that. All those other days that you're on, I need you to be connected to the work. And I need you to understand the work that goes forth each and every day and how we are impacting lives. You're planting seeds that you may not ever get to see sprout, but just know that everything that happens day in and day out is impactful. And so, how we present ourselves to children, how we talk to children, that self-fulfilling prophecy, the expectations that we have for them, that's real. And to have some of my students come back now who are, grown, they're adults,
Mm-hmm.
and to be able to tell me, I'll never forget how you made me feel. I'll never forget what you said. And there are some students that I honestly, I wish I could go back and I have a do-over
Mm-hmm.
because I didn't always get it right. But what I would say is if you know that education is your calling, that your talents and your God-given abilities fit what is needed in the educational sector, and you love children, all children from all walks of life, from all socioeconomic backgrounds, those who may can compare to your lifestyle, those who may not, those who come with a wealth of resources and families who are involved, and those who may not. If you know that that is for you, the first thing that I would say is to do your research and really understand what you. It's an investment. It's a lifelong investment.
Mm-hmm.
Truly do your research. Research the universities and colleges that are who have the programs that you're looking for, those that have high graduation rates, looking at the different type of classes that they offer. You need to do your research and where you're going to get educated. Looking for those who are really, understanding the importance of what diversity, equity, and inclusion looks like in education. And it's not just about race, but it's about diversity of thought. It's about um, being open to different perspectives. It's about understanding differentiated instruction and that it's not a one size fit all. It's not putting everybody into a box. It's not making sure that this is the way I'm going to teach it because it's easy for me as the adult. But what is it that my students need? And so you really got to do your research and truly understand what it takes, what is all factored into being an educator. Find individuals such as myself that you can talk to, that you can pick their brain about education and the challenges that they've gone through. I think that that's huge. You need to know the investment that you're getting ready to make
Mm-hmm.
early on. If you're someone who might be changing careers, there's a lot of people who've gone through alternative programs. They started out in business, they've started out, in the medical field, and they've come into education. You really need to do your research on those programs and how well they're preparing you to step into these classrooms and be able to educate students because that was not like your original career field. And so just know that you can't do this by yourself. We need to collaborate. We need community. We need each other as educators. It's so very important, but you've got to find your people. You've got to find like minded individuals. Because if I had listened to some of those individuals that were seasoned teachers when I first started teaching, who told me, oh, all this extra that you're doing, or it doesn't take all of that. If I had listened to them, I would have chosen, the road mostly traveled. I would have, and I hate to use the word mediocre. When I say that, what I'm saying is, how much are you looking at your lessons and what you have planned from students year to year, and you're challenging yourself to make adjustments. You're challenging yourself to look at the data and say, this isn't working or this is. When I say mediocre, I'm talking about routine and make the students fit it versus making it fit your students. Um, and we also have people who are okay with just doing the bare minimum. But for me, I operate in excellence and I've tapped into my calling, and it's not enough for me. I hold myself to high expectations, therefore I hold people around me to those same expectations as well.
Wow, that's a beautiful thing. And that now, when we say the conference room, I'm in one of the few libraries that stay open till 9 o'clock. I don't know how long your library stay open till where you at, but very few of ours stay open till 9. So we got like a few more minutes. They walking around giving us the eye. So no problem. But we doing good. Um, what's some of your outlook on just the future, digital information, the trends, the challenges, different themes that you see coming out? What are some of your thoughts on just the future outlook for education in the digital landscape?
Yeah. That's a great question. First and foremost, for those who may still push back on the inclusion of technology, it's not going anywhere. How technology should be used in the classrooms or in education, definitely we want to have conversations around that. But to think that technology is going somewhere, it's not. It's only going to continue to advance. And so we've got to stay abreast and stay informed about that landscape and how it impacts what we do. Let me say this. There is no replacing of a person. There's no replacement for the teacher in the classroom, for the instructional coaches, for the campus leaders. Technology cannot replace what we do because there has to be human connection. And even though it can try to mimic it, so to speak, it's the authenticity of what we do that makes the difference. However, as I stated earlier, the efficiency and the effectiveness that technology can help us do, being able to bridge the gaps, give our students opportunity to connect with others in their state, globally, within their country, be able to tap into that to be able to enrich the education that our students are using. Higher education uses it. There's this hybrid model. You can have online, totally asynchronous courses. You can have the hybrid model where from time to time you join into a Zoom space or another virtual space, but the other time you're solely, working asynchronously, or they also continue to offer the face-to-face. And so that's cutting edge. That gave me an opportunity to obtain my doctorate in a way that helped me with my availability or match the needs of my family. And so as educators, we've got to stay abreast with that, and we've got to also look at bridging research with practice. And when I say research, the pedagogy of teaching and learning, and when we talk about education, it's one thing to think about it in theory, but what does it look like in practice? And we've got to start lifting those individuals who are doing an amazing job with that. Because sometimes what we read and what's being taught, it doesn't also look like the communities that we serve. And so I need to know how does that translate? How does that apply to the students that I'm going to serve? And making sure that we're tapping into that complexity because it really is. But I would say, for one, being open to technology and understanding that it's not going anywhere, but also being able to challenge how it's used and maybe challenging the thought that it could replace, us as humans. Absolutely not. And then also bridging research and practice, just making sure that we're staying on top of the research, but that we're also looking at what does it look like truly in application, especially to our communities, and especially how does this research impact, the communities of our Black and brown children.
Wonderful, wonderful. As we come down, it feels like we got to have a part two at some point because we get cut off with the library, but we good.
This has been a lot.
Yeah, this is great. And I hope everybody able to digest it all because we ain't finished. In what ways are you grateful for your accomplishments so far? And just like some words of wisdom, what's next? Shout outs, final thoughts, anything like that.
Yeah. Again, I talked about leaving a legacy. I just finished doing a first generation presentation at our local community college. Shout out to Texarkana College. Shout out to Lee Williams. And that was very, very eye opening for me. I didn't know how much I needed that space to really talk about my journey as a first generation college student, to be the first in my family to complete, that undergraduate degree, getting a bachelor's, to be the first, in my immediate family to continue education, getting the master's, being a principal or getting the principal certification and leading schools, and then being the first to obtain a doctorate. And so I'm grateful to be the chosen person that God has said you are the one who is going to trail this blaze or blaze this trail, excuse me, for your family, and to be able to show those who are coming after you that it is possible, to be chosen to say, I can make some shifts in generational cycles, and to be able to provide opportunities for my family, and to be set up in ways, to have connections with other people, and to be networked, and to be in these spaces to say, hey, I know someone who can help you with that. It's not just about the financial advancement, but it's also about putting them in space, to be able to have connections, to be able to do for my mother who has sacrificed so much to get me to this place as a single parent. And so I'm grateful to have been chosen. It came with its own set of challenges, but I know that it was definitely worth it. Um, Definitely giving a shout out to my mom. I want to say her name, Judy Chambers. I said my mother earlier, but I want to say her name. And I hope that she knows how much I truly, truly appreciate all that she's done. I want to say the name of my grandparents who've gone on, but who were very much a part of my upbringing. The late, great Arthur Lee Chambers and Velma Lee Chambers. I want to thank all of my family, my extended family, my best friends, all of those in my sister circle, so to speak. And this may sound some type of way, but I want to thank those who challenged me. I want to thank those who came in opposition against me, those who wrote the petition, those who signed the petition. Um, it pushed me out of my comfort zone, and we know that sometimes God has a way of saying you wouldn't have moved if I didn't allow this to happen. And so I'm grateful for it all. Every experience that I've had as a career educator has been necessary to get me to the place that I'm in now. And my goal is just to continue to remain humble, to be grateful for the experiences, to be grateful for people like you who felt like I had something to offer. I don't take that lightly at all.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you. And I like that. As I'm getting the second eye, I'm getting the second eye. It kind of so I'm so thankful. We're gonna have a part two. We gotta have a part two. I'm so thankful to the Parsimonial Boutique. Thank you for being a willing worker servant with working with people and staying in the education space, being a black female at top level. Appreciate that. African American Black History Month. We couldn't set this up timing wise right. And so I appreciate that iron sharpens iron enthusiasm. Keep up the great work. Sometimes you expect the flowers at the end of the race, but you don't hear the encouragement while you're in the tunnel. So I thank you. Let me
Thank
get
you.
out of here before they come knock on this door. And I thank you so much. Keep up the great work. Big ups to Divergent Consulting. I appreciate that, sis. For stepping out your comfort zone, first of all, and setting the example for other people out there to be inspired. Keep up those treks for yourself and those other people. And we'll see you on part two.
Ah,
All right.
thank you. Thank you
Thank
all that actually joined, commented, those of you who are here live, and for the encouragement in the chat. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Lynn. All of you, Patrice. I want to give honor to your name, but I think it's Karama. Maybe that's how we say her name. Thank you all that are here. I saw you in the chat. I appreciate you. And don't forget to plan your work and work your plan.
All right, enough said. With that, we're gonna thank y'all so much. The Parsimonial Boutique, phenomenal interview. Thank you, Dr. Taryn, for all that you do, and keep up the wonderful work. We'll see y'all soon. Love y'all. Peace.